Hey friends, are you looking to pull off the perfect heist and you want some professional advice?
Well, then stick around. You're in the perfect place. My name is Timothy, though some people do call me Tim, and I am a professional DM. And today I'm here to help you to create the perfect plan for when the plan hits the fan in a D&D heist. Because, trust me, it will. Today's musing topic is submitted to us by Chef SG591, and so together we're going to lean into those classic heist vibes and see if we can't come up with a few answers for you. Heists are campy as all get out sometimes, and frankly, that's a load of fun. There's tons of different tropes out there regarding what a heist is supposed to look like, and so we're going to talk a little bit about the kinds of tropes that we're trying to hit, the tropes that PCs play a part in, the good old-fashioned split party, and how to break down all of these different tropes and the different stages of a heist in a way that's going to be satisfying to run at the table. Sound good? Let's dig in. So, hitting the tropes is a good thing, and there's a number of them that kind of exemplify the trope sphere, particularly in Dungeons & Dragons. The first, of course, is the need for an absolutely elaborate plan and the high probability that that plan is not going to survive contact with the enemy. The fact that your plans are going to be broken is pretty much something that is expected when you go into a heist situation. Plan B is typically going to be loud and is going to defeat the purpose of having the original plan, and if possible, you're trying to salvage out the actual mission while dealing with the fallout of all the things that have gone wrong in this entropy style genre that is the D&D heist. Sometimes we can lean into things like the inside job that allows us to have somebody on the inside either planted by us or that brought us the job in the first place, and that's a trope that can bring out excitement in certain people who are really interested in the master of disguise and sort of that infiltration vibe. But just as likely, we're going to go the stealth route with our sneak thieves that are enjoying slipping from cover to cover and never being seen, or out into the straight up whammo of having the good old hitter. But we'll get to that in the PC tropes just a little bit. It's optional in D&D heists and in the heist genre whether or not it's important that your players maintain their hidden status in terms of identity, whether or not they're going to be known or not known, but it can play a big part in the role, and adding that element of needing to keep your cover intact in a heist can really spice things up in those situations. When it comes to the PCs, my personal favorite source of inspiration when it comes to the tropes of PCs is the TV show Leverage. I feel like it really hits all of the tropes in every way possible, both in terms of your protagonists and the missions that they went on, the fact that they were generally doing good despite the fact that they were doing it in a bad way, which fits the D&D vibe so very, very well. It was a great show that I watched from start to finish with my wife. I absolutely adored it. And that idea basically breaks down to the following elements: the hitter, the mastermind, the grifter, the thief, the hacker. Right? Now, not all of these fit quite as well into the D&D realm as others. We don't usually have a whole bunch of high-tech security systems that need to be hacked into in D&D, though it's not out of the realm of possibilities, particularly if your campaign is running, say, Eberron, or you're just leaning hard into the artificers and the like. But there's a number of problems that you run into with each of these different styles that are going going to draw your players towards them that need to be addressed at the table. If you want to run a good heist, you pretty much have to address these in one way or the other. So, the hitter. Now, in heist tropes, the hitter is that super awesome fighter type that fits into D&D so well, but the hitter scenes are usually opportunities in which the hitter completely outclasses his foes until you get down to the cool fight scene between people of equal skill later in the movie. But early on in your show, you're typically looking at mooks that can be taken out with a single punch as long as you manage to beat them off the bat and they don't see you coming, so that you can pull off the cover that you're trying to set up. Often the hitters are the guys who take a few hits, as well as they're the ones that pratfall or otherwise get stuck in comedic situations where they're being thrown out of buildings or attacked by an entire bar, or otherwise creating the distractions because their skills are not as specialized. These are all awesome scenes in Dungeons & Dragons, but a little bit harder to pull off in a typically designed adventure, because a lot of the time we're trying to design something that's maybe level appropriate to our characters. We don't necessarily put in a lot of 5-10 hit point opponents that can be popped with a single attack, or even 20 hit points at the higher tiers where they've got enough to be able to take a couple of hits, but a single miss is going to have disastrous results. That's a big shame for the hitter player who, when they're trying to lean into that fantasy, frankly, they want to be able to have that moment where they just shine and are awesome and get to save the day by being able to silence somebody. So including situations where you can have a low hit point opponent who not taking him out swiftly enough, aka in a opposed check of initiative rolls, or swiftly enough in terms of taking him out in a single round or grappling him and stopping him from getting somewhere, is a big miss. What we want to be able to do is include those and have alarm systems, gongs to smash, yelling to be able to alert nearby people, or other mechanisms in place so that if they're not swiftly and completely overcome, then the hitter has failed at their role and entropy kicks in and the situation gets worse. That's pretty much the most important trick that I would say is worth throwing in for hitters, is to include those kinds of mooks and those kinds of situations, but to also plan on both the opportunity that the hitter will fail or the possibility of their success, and allowing that to drive how the narrative of your story is going to come out. Now, definitely don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't have some opponents that are going to take the whole group to manage, and even opponents at key locations that can have that. But just make sure you give something to where the hitter can have their moment to shine. The next type that fits into D&D pretty well is the Mastermind. However, it kind of sucks in D&D just as much as it's awesome, because typically speaking, it's pretty rare for a D&D group to have only one person at the table who thinks of themselves as being the guy with the plan. And D&D groups are notoriously we're notoriously bad at picking between the two plans that are presented to us. So when you're dealing with a mastermind sort of trope for a player character, you have to be careful, because you're going to have multiple people coming up with plans, and there's a potential for some butting of heads. This requires a lot more out-of-character management and management at the DM level to figure out which of these plans is the one that has the majority of backing, to give opportunities for multiple plans to be put into action so that multiple parties can take the lead role in masterminding a scene than you would otherwise have to deal with if you were writing a book or a screenplay for a movie or TV show. When it comes to situations in Dungeons and Dragons and the Mastermind trope, if you have more than one person that's leaning towards this or just naturally gravitates towards a leadership position, you're going to want to make sure that you have opportunity for everybody to take on that role so that they can enjoy themselves. Let's see. Sometimes you can avert that kind of an issue by building into your session 0, if the entire campaign is about heists, those specific roles, and by having somebody place up their hand as being desiring to be the mastermind this go round, or even for multiple people to put their hands up and agree to take turns. You can ameliorate some of that problem just by good old-fashioned communication. Does anybody else have cat hair that always flies up your nose as soon as you're doing something where you're not allowed to pause the video? Maybe that's just me, but I swear, my cats, they know. Anyway, the Grifter and Thief frankly work especially well in Heists and Dungeons and Dragons because it's pretty much just built into the skill set with deception checks, persuasion checks, disguise kits, magical spells that allow you to overcome these sorts of things, stealth and sleight of hand, almost everything that you would expect of a good heist TV show or movie fits in perfectly into a Dungeons and Dragons adventure on the regular, and so in a heist, doubly so. There's little that needs to be done outside of correctly managing the flow of information and the flow of turns to maintain a solid feel for the grifters and the thieves to be able to run the kinds of cons that they're looking to run, or to sneak through the place in the manner that they are looking to sneak. When it comes to the aforementioned hacker, that you're obviously not going to have a ton of, hacking in Dungeons and Dragons can be analogous to your utility spellcasting, providing means by which your spellcasters can overcome problems either up close and personal or from the van with their special tricks and abilities is an important way to interact. My personal favorite is Control Flames as a cantrip while people are sneaking around and putting out torches around the place, a la the old 1990s, I want to say, Thief video game with the water balloons on the ends of arrows that was just a ton of fun to play with. Giving those kinds of opportunities and leaning into efforts of that nature is pretty cool and pretty important, and if you can find ways for your players to be able to disguise people or otherwise create opportunities for them to sneak or avoid notice or to create distractions, that's in some cases kind of the hacker role when you're using magic. Also, of course, you can have automatons and elaborate bank vaults and other things like that that require thieves' tools or your tinkering abilities of an artificer in order to be able to bypass, and that can lean into that same trope as well. It can be a load of fun regardless. However, when it comes to running the heist itself, you're going to have a handful of very specific things that are going to come up. First and foremost, the elephant in the room is splitting the party. Pretty much, under most circumstances, the general advice to DMs seems to be don't split the party. It's also the advice for the players, of course, as the players are worried about getting horribly murdered and maimed, whereas the DM is worried about controlling the flow of play. But in heists, splitting the party is your friend. It allows you to control tension by splitting away at those moments of highest tension to the next member of the team and working them towards a satisfactory point of cliffhanger for everybody involved before jumping into an initiative-based resolution to bring things back on track or to a conclusion. And it's just way more fun. It's absolutely how a heist is intended to be run, but it does require a little bit more management by you as the DM and a a degree of speedy cutting away from one situation to another and some on-your-feet thinking in order to create the kind of complications, in addition to those you've already prepared, that are going to continue moving things towards entropy and encouraging action amongst the players at the table. There are going to be stages to your heist. It's in a pretty typical order in a heist on a TV show or the like, but you can mix and match somewhat and they'll shift around depending upon the choices of your players. But generally speaking, you'll have a scene for hiring, a scene for reconnaissance, a scene for the planning of the heist after the reconnaissance, of course the execution, and involved in the execution the major complication that comes up, as well as the completion and resolution. Leaning into this order of play allows your players to lean into both the roles and tropes that they are most interested in, but also into a satisfactory story that tells everything that they're looking to get out of joining you at your table for this heist. Leaning into the hiring scene just allows them to get that feel of what's coming, while the planning and recon scenes are super vital, even though the planning can get a little bit bogged down as we get so many different ideas and it can be hard to pick one. The best way to manage your time when it comes to the planning scenes is to listen carefully to your players and the ideas that they're coming up with, and occasionally pause things and regurgitate what you feel like the plan is, involving as many elements of what you heard as possible to allow them to correct you and move towards things. And don't be afraid to call for and put it to a vote on the out of character level, and to encourage that forward progress so that they don't just sit around talking about it all night long, which is, let's be honest, a very real possibility. The execution phase is going to be a mad rush to deal with the various problems, and with a split party is going to involve cuts at a continuous situation just constantly. But what you really need to be focusing on for yourself are the complications, small or large, that are going to continue to pick away at things and make your players make decisions about how to progress through the circumstance. But there is almost always going to be a planned major complication near the end of the heist that needs to be overcome as the main plan and plot gets thrown out to some degree, and a major pivot in the moment needs to be had. Whether that's arriving at the bad guy's lair and finding that he's not there, or that he is there unexpectedly. It's a super common trope, and it makes for a satisfying experience when your players are able to encounter it, discover it, and make a new plan. So wherever possible, try to put a tiny little air gap in there so that they can realize that the situation has changed and have preferably mere moments to switch their plans and move to another solution on the fly. This hopefully includes a reasonably obvious ticking clock if possible, so that you can encourage your players to move it along and not go back to a new planning stage, which has been the death of many a satisfying heist encounter throughout the ages. There are a couple of other things that I took quick notes on when thinking about what would be important in a heist. The first and foremost is the desirability of handouts. Whether you're playing online or in person, handouts for a heist add a super satisfying feel to the experience, especially if that handout is a map of the situation that your players are going to be taking their characters into. This map shouldn't involve all of the information that is available on your map, and frankly, the Golden Keys book did an amazing job of including a bunch of partially complete maps with information upon which players can make decisions, but without including every single nuance and detail so that the players could then discover new and interesting things while they were progressing throughout the courses of the adventures. Those, if you're looking for inspiration, are a great place to start for what a good heist map should look like, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy or well drawn. Trust me, mine will certainly never be. But a hasty chicken scratch scrawl that's thrown together by the guard that you've paid for the information can literally be a chicken scratch scrawl that you went ahead and jotted down on a piece of paper without looking at the main map and then handed over to your players on the table, or took a picture of and sent the screenshot through to your players online. That's enough to provide a hugely elevated value and usually only takes 5 or 10 minutes at the most to put together. It's some really valuable prep. Another thing that is important to include, that again Golden Keys does a pretty good job of, is to include secrets that can be used as leverage. Just like the TV show of the same name, the secrets of the various NPCs that were outside of the main protagonist crew were often used against those people in order to gain information, gain access, or otherwise flummox the plans of the bad guy. Putting those secret relationships, secret debts, addictions, problems onto the various NPCs that are involved, even if they are just a lowly guard, is an important and useful way to elevate your heist to a different level that's going to involve your players a little bit more in the scenario and give them tools that they may or may not discover in a lot of different places. You can create these Mike Shea style by having a list of them and just dragging and dropping them onto individuals, but it's a good idea to also have a few big key ones to place on the key NPCs that are not going to change or be dropped on the spot under any circumstance, but instead are a major pivot point that could be some way that the players can change the dial of how the situation is going to rock out. Complication management, as mentioned, is really important in heists, and one of the ways that you can deal with that, there's a bunch of different ways, but you can use clocked management. For instance, using the Angry GM's tension pool can be a great way to put your players on a proverbial clock by tracking in-game time by large 10-minute chunks. Every time an hour rolls around, roll all of those dice and see if a complication occurs. This naturally creates a desire to hasten through the scenario and also allows you to start rolling those complications out. It's also a great idea to keep some small back pocket complications that can simply push the action forward a tiny bit when things are lagging. In a recent heist campaign that I was blessed to be able to be a player in, we had cut open a hole and were debating our plan on moving down over the rooftops, and our DM skillfully had one of the patrollers start walking towards the hole that we were peering out of. As we held up the cutout piece of wood to block the doorway and essentially just held our breath, we didn't really have anything more than a single sleight of hand versus a perception check in terms of mechanics to deal with, but that moment made us immediately spur on afterwards because we knew that the world was not sitting around for us to wait and make all of our plans. keeping that kind of action and that kind of minor complication coming when things start to dip down into the wear over planning stage is a great way to push things back towards the action. And sometimes that complication leads to an all-out fight, and we are playing Dungeons and Dragons, so it's fairly clear that we enjoy some crunchy combat here and there. Frankly, I think that heists are one of my favorite scenarios in Dungeons & Dragons. I love to interject one into published adventures if they don't have one already, and I just have a lot of fun running with the little mystery of how to find the best way to overcome it, and of course the constant run of complications in order to keep things exciting. I hope that this has been a help to you, Chef, and if anybody else has got any... And if you've got any great ideas for a musing video, don't hesitate to let me know. One thing I do have to mention is that as the channel grows, it gets harder and harder to keep up with these various musing style videos, and if you want to have a say in what breaks the tie as regards which musing video we're going to do, then feel free to join as a YouTube member of the channel and help support me in putting these out for you and in having a say in what we're going to be talking about. Thanks so much for your support in all manners that it already comes. You make my day every time you even drop a simple comment on these videos. Thank you so much, and happy adventuring.